Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us today the English nut and the author of the recently launched book, Stories of Words and Phrases, Sumanto Chattopadhyay. Sumanto needs no introduction because he has been a celebrated actor, model, creative director, and more in the field of advertising, and now an author as well. Shumanto, welcome to the show and tell us what's going on in life and more importantly, when and why you got rid of those long flowing hair of yours.
Thank you very much for having me on your show, Prashant. And yes, people used to tell me that, you should audition for Game of Thrones. So yeah, that's the kind of hair that I had. But they kind of started turning into dreadlocks naturally without being intended. So I decided it was time to sort of cut myself off from them. And you know what? Hair always grows back. So they can come back at any time. But yeah, right now, I think that this low maintenance hair style is what's working for me. And I'm doing very well. Otherwise, I'm really excited about the fact that my book is finally out. And that's why I'm here talking to you. And so, yeah, things are good. Thank you very much.
Awesome. And you have recently released this book of yours, which you have authored. You mentioned about it, yourself just now. Stories of Words and Phrases. Please tell us what this book is all about and who and why should one read it?
So, as the title suggests, this is a collection of about 80 stories which are about words or phrases. Words like Bluetooth, for example, or khaki, which is from India, or phrases like letting the cat out of the bag. Yeah, so these are phrases and words that we use every day, but very often we don't know that there's a fascinating story, a fascinating history to these words. Why do people say that, oh, so and so let the cat out of the bag when you gave away somebody's secret, for example? Why was there a cat in a bag and who let it out? So yeah, so these are the stories that I tell in the book, and they're very interesting and often smile-inducing stories. Uh, but the thing is that also it's all of this is backed by research because you have to go and dig and find out. There are a lot of etymologists out there who are doing constant research on this subject of trying to find out where, which was the first time in print that a particular word appeared, or a particular phrase appeared, and what did it mean originally and what does it mean now, because things, words, nothing is a constant. Words keep evolving, they keep changing their meaning, sometimes subtly, sometimes drastically. So this was just a subject that was fascinating to me. So I decided to write a book about it, also because I was approached by a publisher to write it. And I think that people should read this if you're interested in language in any way. It's a great book to read because it's a very informative but very entertaining book to read. So I think that's why you should read it. And of course, if you're a teacher or a student who's involved in English education in any way, then this book is a must read for you. But I think it it's a book that anybody who enjoys the language will. It's not, while it's got a lot of facts in it, it's a very light, it's written in a lighter vein. So it's a very easy, smooth, effortless read. I know I'm saying all this and I'm the author, but I think that though some people who have read the book have already given me this feedback, so I think it's quite accurate.
And accurate it is because I've read the book cover to cover myself, and as you said, it's written in a very light-hearted fashion, and it's free-flowing, and you can read a chapter at a time, take breaks, or take it at one go. In fact, I've written a review of the book as well. I'll leave the link for the viewers in the description. Your book, Stories of Words and Phrases, has history of 30 words and 50 phrases from the English language. When exactly did you decide that you should write this book, and how long did it take you to write this book?
So, I've been running this social media channel called The English Nut since 2019. And somewhere along the way, an editor from Rupa Publishers discovered The English Nut, and I got a message in my inbox on The English Nut one day saying that, hi, we find the topics that you cover quite interesting, and we feel that you could turn this into a book. Because while I cover various topics related to the English language, etymology, which is the origins of words, is something that is very often a part of it. So they said, why don't you turn this into a book? And so began my discussions with them. I'd not honestly thought about writing a book at that point, but when they approached me, I said, hey, why not? This seems like a natural progression. And yeah, so then we got into a contract, and then I started, and it was a very slow process, honestly, because uh, I mean, I was in a very, very high intensity job. In advertising, you don't have weekends, because your client will call you on a Friday evening and say, can we have this on Monday morning? And you can kind of argue with them or request them, can we, at least give us till Tuesday? And then with a lot of effort, they kind of grudgingly agree. But since, in advertising, you're completely dependent on your clients' money, you have to finally say yes. So yeah, so I was just saying that to give you a background to why I did not write the book very fast. It took me a few years to complete the book, because I was not writing consistently. I was writing in between all my other sort of assignments and jobs. But I did submit the manuscript like 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago. And after that, what I realized was that, advertising and publishing are, the concept of time in these two fields are absolutely the opposite of each other. In advertising, everything is wanted yesterday. Like I told you, like you don't even have the luxury of taking a weekend off there sometimes. And in publishing, the concept of time is glacial. 5 years is nothing. So that's what I realized. So I was getting very restless. Every few months I was checking, when are you guys publishing the book? And because it's now been a while since I submitted the manuscript, and they said, but we still have manuscripts from before COVID, which we've still not published. So I realized that they, and also I think, to be fair to publishers, bringing out a book is not like like a fast job like bringing out an ad campaign. So everything takes time, so therefore you have to slow down in the way that you approach it. But anyway, finally, this earlier this year, they said, hey, we're going to publish it. And then, yeah, then the whole process, that there's a huge process that has to take place before uh, a manuscript can turn into a published book. So we went through that, and here I am.
Awesome. So, you know, we are enjoying the fruits of your labor, and, you're making us eat out of our hands, which is wonderful. So, can you tell us how you went about your research for each and every word and phrase? I mean, after all, let's face it, isn't it as simple as thinking of an interesting word or a phrase and then asking GPT all about that word and phrase, and voila, you have a book with you? So far as you can think of 80 words and phrases. So all you really did was think of 80 words and phrases. How do you counter that?
Well, I mean, to start with, I'd like to state that, as I was telling you earlier, I submitted the manuscript for this book more than 2 years ago to the publisher, and this is before ChatGPT got invented. So I didn't have the luxury of using ChatGPT to write this book. And I'm very glad that I didn't, because you're right. There's a lot that ChatGPT and other uh, AI apps and large language models can do for us. But the thing is that ChatGPT lies as well. AI fabricates stories when they don't have the facts. And even, because I've actually played around a lot with ChatGPT lately, and I find that even when the facts are out there, I mean, I can do a Google search and find something, But when I ask ChatGPT, they give me an incorrect answer. So yes, AI is very useful for gathering data, but at times it can, at least in the current stage of its development, it can give you a lot of incorrect answers as well. And I think in terms of uh, so the first part of the question was, is it as simple as gathering or selecting 80 topics? Yeah, so first of all, I had to select those 80 topics. I mean, actually worked with from a much larger, a longer list of words and phrases. But then when you go to research them, sometimes you don't find a lot of information about the background because it's not yet been dug out. It may be in some library somewhere, but unless it's digitized, it's not available to me here in Mumbai or in India. So then that kind of decided. So first of all, the list of words and phrases was something, just words and phrases that I found interesting, and then I discussed them with the editor, and then we kind of came to a mutually uh, agreed to list. And after that, I started researching. And as I said, there were some things for which I couldn't find any background, or, like there was only enough information to write like three sentences about it. So then those topics kind of got eliminated. And then there were others which had very rich stories, and there was lots of information, lots of data about when they were first printed and how they were first used, and how that evolved over time. So then that determined which words or phrases made it finally into the book. In terms of why would ChatGPT have written the book? So I don't think that ChatGPT. So I think as an author, each of us, whether one is an author or not, has a unique perspective on anything. So I have a unique perspective on life, on English, on vocabulary, on etymology. So when I write a chapter about a particular word or phrase, all of that comes into play, right? So it's a way that I link it to popular culture as I know and understand it. My sense of humor, I think that while I think there is maybe humor inherent in a particular topic, you have to have that vision, or you have to have that bent of mind to be able to see that, or see the humor in a situation or in a story. So I think that all of that comes into play. Otherwise, that's why you have authors. I don't know whether a few years from now, there's this constant debate: will AI completely replace creative people of all kinds or not? I don't know. It's early days. Yes, I think there's a lot of stuff that AI can do, and it's fantastic, and it can be a fantastic assistant. But I don't think that we're at the point yet where AI will write your. I mean, AI can write a whole book for you, but how interesting that book is going to be, I don't know, or how useful it's going to be. I mean, it's going to be perhaps just a regurgitation or a summarization of the information that's out there. So I think that writing a book like this takes more than just gathering the information and summarizing it.
Fantastic. And what would your advice be to the folks who have always thought of writing a book, have an idea, but are somehow kicking, the can down the road? Was that the case for you too? How did you summon the energies to actually hit the pen to the paper?
So, one is, my situation is a little different because this is a book that was commissioned by a publisher. And it was commissioned by a publisher because I already had this social media property called The English Nut, in which I was creating content about English, about the language, in video form. Uh, so it was about, uh, you know, it was like progressing from that and writing about similar subjects, but from the perspective of uh, putting it in a book, because I think it's a little bit more rigorous when you're putting it in a book. There's some scholarship involved. Uh, there's a lot of course, I do a lot of fact checking for whatever I put out on the English Nut. But when you publish a book with a reputed publisher like Rupa, their people also rigorously check everything that you're writing when it's nonfiction. So yeah, so I think that's how this book progressed. But yeah, it was slow in terms of writing. Some people say that, oh, during the lockdown and during COVID, you would have had more time to write. But In my case, that didn't happen because I was at that point in a full-time advertising job in a very high stress job, and things were very difficult because during COVID, a lot of clients stopped paying the agency, or they cut their fees because they said we're not so profitable anymore because our products are not being sold during COVID, so we can't pay you as much, and or we can't advertise as much. So it was about managing and steering the agency through those crisis times. So I actually became a lot busier during COVID. Yes, we were not commuting, but that's when we all discovered Zoom and its cousins. And yeah, so I actually, during the lockdown, my book sort of didn't progress at all. It was stalled. I again took it up after things came back to normal, and then finished the book.
Right. So you mentioned in this case, Rupa Publications chose you, and therefore you had a publisher available readily for you. But in general, let's say if somebody writes a book, and this can be instructed to the budding authors, how should one select a publication house in general, or does one have a choice at all? And what should one be careful about?
So I think that in my case, like I said, this is how it happened. And also when they approached me, then I kind of talked and negotiated with them directly, and we came up with a mutually agreed to contract. Um, but I think that if I were to write a book again, I would go through a book agent, because I think a book agent, a literary agent, uh, is able to do a lot of the work for you in terms of suggesting the best publisher for a particular genre. And also the negotiation, the following up with the publisher, then maybe even at the marketing stage to help market the book. There's a lot of for example, right now I'm very busy marketing my book, because in this day and age you can't just write a book and hope it's going to be bought. You have to help. The publisher plays a part, but the author also has to market their own book. But I think if you have a book agent, and there's certain agents who not only help you get strike the deal with find the right publisher, strike the deal with them, kind of be the go-between the author and the publisher during the whole process of writing, and then the editing and all of that, and the release of the book. But yeah, they can help you market your book as well later on. So I would advise somebody who's writing today that once you have either finished writing a whole book, or you've written a significant amount of the book, maybe you can try to share what you've done with the literary agents out there. There are quite a few of them, and get their opinion.
Okay, excellent. So, for your own book, Stories of Words and Phrases, you managed to get a foreword by the big daddy of English language and the Member of Parliament, Shashi Tharoor himself. So, please
Yes.
tell us how you approached him for this foreword and how did he respond to you?
Well, quite a few years ago, I interviewed Dr. Shashi Tharoor for The English Nut. At that time, I wasn't really thinking about my book, or the fact that one day I might want him to write a foreword to it. If the book was, I don't even know if I'd already started working on the book or not. But yeah, we that in itself was an interesting story, because getting that interview, uh, I remember that this American comedian Hassan Minhaj had done a quiz where he'd interviewed Dr. Shashi Tharoor. He'd quizzed Dr. Shashi Tharoor about certain Gen Z words, and Dr. Tharoor, couldn't get any of the answers right. And I just put a post on the English Nut saying that, Dr. Tharoor, as the English Nut, you would be the ideal person for me to interview. And I promise you, I would not ask you questions about this, this kind of slang. It would be about the English, the Queen's English, or the English that's spoken in India. And when I put that, one of my colleagues, one of my advertising colleagues saw it and said, "Hey, can I collab?" And I had just put it, it was just a kind of a wish. It wasn't like I had a concrete plan of approaching Dr. Tharoor right away. But this colleague of mine said, "Let's make this happen." So I said, "Okay." So then started the process of trying to get in touch and finding out who his manager is. And, we kind of went from one person to another till we eventually found the right person who was the manager who would be able to give us the access. And that's how, after a few months, we managed to get a date in Delhi. I had requested that could we do it because I know that uh, Dr. Tharoor comes to Mumbai a lot. In fact, he was going to be coming for the Tata Literary Fest uh, into Mumbai, and I was saying that I was asking his manager, could you give us a date? On the sidelines of that, I just need an hour, and he said no. Then he gave us a date which was in Delhi, but it was about a month before that Shashi Tharoor actually came for the uh, Tata Literary Fest at the NCPA in Mumbai. And I remember it was a working day, but then I said, this is because I was still very nervous because I had not spoken directly to Dr. Tharoor. So I was still very nervous about landing up in, Delhi, spending my own money, taking like two other people who are going to help me make this video. And what if he was too tied up with, I mean, after all, he's a member of parliament, so any crisis could come up. So then I saw that he is, the one of the first events at the Lit Fest was a panel discussion of which he was a part. So I went there, and I still remember that I was seated in the auditorium, and I saw him coming in a few minutes before the thing was about to start, and he was chatting with a few people, and this was so not me. I just kind of ran down and said, "Hi, Dr. Tharoor, I'm supposed to interview you on that." And he said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Yeah, I go by the name of the English Nut, and I got an appointment to." So he said, "And what about?" So I said about the English language, and he at that point honestly did not know, didn't seem to know anything about this. So anyway, then I sat through his panel discussion, and after that they announced a book signing. So I said, "Okay, this will be another opportunity for me to interact with him." So I quickly went, and you could buy the book right there, and then you had to stand in a queue because lots of people wanted him to sign the book. And I still remember I bought two of his books, and you had to on a post-it write to whom the book should be dedicated. So I put Sumanto on one, and I put the English Nut on the other. And then he wrote his dedication, and obviously by then he'd either checked his emails or spoken to his manager because he wrote from one English Nut to another, and I look forward to chatting with you. So I realized that okay, it's kind of sunk in for him, and I was a lot more relieved after that. So yeah, and then we went for the interview, and the other thing that happened was, we had to go to his official residence in Delhi and set things up and wait for him. And then he came in a bit late, and his manager has said you have 1 hour, but he came in and said, "Oh, I have 20 minutes," and I panicked because I had prepared for like a 1 hour interview, and I had the questions on printouts, and I remember I was sort of shuffling the papers, and I dropped everything on the floor because I was thinking, okay, which are the most important questions? Anyway, then we started the interview, and then as I asked him the questions, he really warmed up to the interview because I think I realized later on he probably said something like that because there must be a lot of interviews where he is not enjoying it or it's repetitive because I'd also studied each and every interview of his there was on YouTube, and I realized that in a lot of cases, even if it was about English like mine was, it was the same set of questions, and I had decided that I'm not going to ask him a single question that I've seen other people ask him. So yeah, so that's how that happened, and then he really warmed up to it. And I still remember his manager was behind him and was waving out to me because he had something else right after that. But Dr. Tharoor was happy to keep on answering questions. So in fact, after about 45 minutes, I said, "I'll let you go. Thank you very much. You answered almost all my questions." So yeah, it was a really wonderful. I mean, I really hit it off with him, I felt. Of course, he's an extremely busy person. So when the time came for me to, when I said, hey, let me try to request him to write the forward, and I had dealt with him through his manager at that time. And this time I kept writing to that manager and I was not getting a response. And even though on LinkedIn, he still wrote his name was still mentioned as the manager office of Dr. Shashi Tharoor. But then I eventually found out that he has a new manager, and I got in touch with the new manager, and then it happened. And then he wrote this wonderful forward, which I am just absolutely thrilled about.
Wonderful. And did Shashi Tharoor want to see the video before you put up on the social media? And was he a little bit sensitive about what he said, what he didn't, or he was cool all about it?
No, no, I think that's the greatest thing about him is that he's a super cool guy. He, and and I think that he's got this rare quality which you don't see among too many Indians in public life, especially among politicians. He doesn't mind being shown up as being wrong or not knowing about something in a because I did this quiz with him and there were questions to which he didn't know the answer or which he gave a wrong answer, and he never told me please delete this or please retake this. He was absolutely fine with it, and I think that's a fantastic quality to have.
Wonderful, but I can clearly say and safely say that if you talk about the English language experts in the country, the first name is Shashi Tharoor's, but the second name is yours, Shumanto. You're getting there with the English nut, you probably already are. So you two are the big daddies of the English language of the country, so I applaud you for that.
Thank you so much. It's I think just it's by default because there are not too many people doing something like this, and I've just stuck to it for quite a few years now. So maybe because of that, people have started associating me with it. In fact, when as this book was being published, I was asked that how are you planning to position your book, and I thought how silly of me. I'm an advertising marketing person, and I not thought through with this question that how should I position it. And this person asked me that is it like would you say it's a one of a kind book? And I said I don't know. Uh, then I asked the publisher, has there been any other book like this on Indian book on English etymology? And they said we don't think so. But I said I was still not 100% convinced. So I was just asking as many people I could. So I approached some very highly regarded English professors in Kolkata. I think one of them got really annoyed because he was a complete stranger. I got hold of his number and I sent him a WhatsApp message. And he said, as far as I know, there isn't. Then I reached out to somebody I know who's a director of a prominent school and who asked around with all the English teachers in the school, but that has there been, because I thought that, there are a lot, not everything is available on the net, right? There could have been a book written 50 years ago by an Indian school or college teacher, which is not available. So I think I mean, of course, Shashi Tharoor's books have segments on etymology. He talks about words originating in various countries, words, Indian English words, and so on and so forth. But I think this is the only book in India which is dedicated to the origins of words and phrases in English.
Awesome. And even the celebrated author Ruskin Bond endorses your book. You have interviewed Ruskin Bond in the past, which very few people have managed to do. So please tell us how you got that opportunity and again some things about Ruskin Bond which you got to experience during that interview.
Yeah, so actually, I think I got the Bond interview because of the Shashi Tharoor interview. Uh, Ruskin Bond's grandson Siddharth uh, had seen that interview, and he thought it would be pretty cool if the English Nut would also interview his grandfather. And a former colleague of mine, Jitendra Patel, Jitu, who's an art director and designer, he was doing a project with Siddharth Bond. And so uh, one day I get a message from him saying, would you like to interview Ruskin Bond? And I said, yes, of course. And but this was in the middle of COVID and all of that. And I said, but let's do it a few months later. And I remember after that, I got So they connected me on a call with after my friend Jitendra spoke to me. We connected to Siddharth Bond, and then suddenly Siddharth brought his grandfather onto the phone, onto the call. And I'm a person who I'm not the hero. I don't have heroes whom I worship and all that. But somehow when I heard Ruskin Bond's voice, I had that hero worshipping moment. I was so tickled that this wonderful writer with a such a charming personality. I'm actually speaking to that guy. So that was a really exciting moment. And then when I went for the interview was conducted at the Savoy Hotel, which is this very old hotel in Missouri, and it it's a hotel where there's a plaque on the wall with Ruskin Bond's name on it because Ruskin Bond has been associated with that hotel for many years. He's co-written a wonderful coffee table book about the hotel, which is prominently displayed around the hotel. And there's a ghost story associated, or like rather a murder story associated with that hotel, which uh, is also there in one of his books. So yeah, so that was great, and they pulled out the stops. They said, we it's a beautiful heritage building, and they said, where do you want to shoot? So we had the luxury of shooting wherever we wanted because it was Mr. Ruskin Bond. And then, we broke for lunch, and they had sort of made this lavish spread for us. And then there was a separate set of items which were the favorites of Mr. Ruskin Bonds. So I think there was shepherd's pie, for example. So Mr. Ruskin Bond ate those, and then he also ate some of our food. And I realized that he has such a great appetite. So not only is he a literary genius and a great writer, but he's a person with a great appetite and, of course, with a great sense of humor. I had such a good time talking to him. And, I'd been warned that, he would get tired quickly. He'll need to take breaks. Nothing. He just wanted to keep, even the lunch break. His grandson insisted, no, let's break for lunch. He said, let's go. I'm in the flow, but, so we broke and then we continued after lunch. And then I got him to read not only his own poems and paragraphs from his books. And I'd seen one thing that in a lot of his interviews, he would be requested to read one of his poems, and he would say, "No, no, you read it." And which he told me initially, and I said, "No." I said that look, people would not be so excited about Sumanto reading your poems, and they'd be far more excited to hear you. So then he obliged, and I think one of his favorite books is Charles Dickens' David Copperfield. So I got him to read. I said, read something, a paragraph or two from that book, which resonate with you. So he did that. So yeah, it was just a really really wonderful experience. And because of that, again, when the book came out, I sort of approached Siddharth and I said, do you think that your grandfather could write a few words? And he was saying that he's very elderly now, and he can't write anything long. I said, even if he writes one sentence, and and I honestly meant this, I said it would be like a blessing for me, because there's just something about Ruskin Bond, right? I mean, he's just such a presence. So I said I want at least one sentence from him in my book. So eventually I did. I got more than one sentence. So I was absolutely thrilled about that.
Clearly, it was a wonderful experience for you interacting with Ruskin Bond. But recalling that interview, wasn't it surprising for you when Ruskin Bond couldn't tell you the meaning of the word Stepney? I think all Indian middle class children from 80s and 90s whose dads, like mine, drove Lambretta scooters knew very well the word Stepney. In fact, I had trouble. Americans understand my predicament when I ran once into a flat tire back in the US. Were you surprised at all that Mr. Bond could recall what is Stepney?
No, I think my question to him was, what is the origin of the word Stepney, which he didn't know. He thought that it originated in an area of London, but actually it's a place in Wales, after which it was named. So yeah, so I yeah, so the thing is that you have to also remember his age. There were some things that I was asking him, like, in one of his books, he'd written about phobias and all. There are these very unusual and colorful names for phobias. And he said, and he would say, I don't know that one. And I said, but I got it from your book. He said, well, I've forgotten, and I can completely understand because I've written a book, just one book today. And I feel that, if you suddenly ask me a question, I might in that moment not be able to recall what I had written in the book. And he has written so many books over so many decades. So for him to remember everything is not easy. But at the same time, his memory for literature and literary figures was phenomenal. Like, you talked about any book, he talked about that book about the author, the life of the author. Uh, he just knew so much about that person. Yeah, like people like Somerset Maugham, for example, who was a famous writer, a British writer. He knew so much about that person and many other writers that we discussed in the interview. It was just wonderful.
Clearly, folks like Shashi Tharoor and Ruskin Bond are a class apart. But who are your favorite Indian English authors and why?
So I think, first of all, I feel that our the time that we have to read books has become more and more precious now, especially in the days of social media and OTT. The amount of time we spend reading books has really shrunk. So I'm very particular about which books I read. And when it comes to Indian, I mean, I read books written by authors from all over the world, but I particularly love to read books by Indian English authors. And there are some really fantastic ones, and then some not so good ones. I don't want to talk about the not so good ones, but the really fantastic ones are people like Amitav Ghosh, Vikram Seth. Vikram Seth has written many books. One of them is it's called The Golden Gate, and it's an entire novel in verse. And you'd think that that could be very tedious, but it's the most delightful. It's a slim book, and it's such an easy read. It's so beautifully written. Amitav Ghosh has written many, many books. The Glass Palace is one of them. He's written a trilogy of books called the Ibis trilogy. With the Sea of Poppies is one of the three books in that, which is all about the opium. It was set uh, before the opium wars that Britain had with China, and there's this whole history where the British Empire, the British rulers grew opium in India and sold it in China. Uh, and the thing is that, the Chinese rulers did not want opium to come into their country because it was destroying the society. Opium addiction was destroying Chinese society. So when the Chinese authorities, in fact, burnt one huge consignment of opium and said that we're not going to allow it in, Britain actually went to war against China. So so that they would still so they could continue selling opium. And that opium was grown in India, all over India. Eastern India was one big hub. Bihar was a big hub of growing opium. And farmers I mean, it's actually a terrible uh, period of history, because the farmers, for example, in Bihar, they were forced to grow poppies for opium, and it was actually not profitable for them. And they had to grow it in place of rice or wheat or whatever, food crops that they would have otherwise grown, and they were forced to grow this and sell it at a fixed rate to the British, which made it very unprofitable. So that's what made that part of India so impoverished. you know we talk about poverty in India in general. We talk about uh, parts of Bihar being even poorer and even less developed than other parts of the country, for example. And this is one of the big causes of it. The fact that they were forced to grow opium, which completely impoverished that area and destroyed the communities there. So, I mean, this is just a background. The story itself is so fascinating. I could go on. Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni is another Indian English author. One of her books is The Palace of Illusions, and it's based on the Mahabharata. It's about It's the Mahabharata from Draupadi's perspective, because all epics are generally always from a male perspective. This was a woman's perspective, and not just any woman, but Draupadi, who actually was completely key to the entire war that happened. So yeah, then um, I think you another person that you have to talk about is Rohinton Mistry. Rohinton Mistry wrote this wonderful book called A Fine Balance, which is set in Mumbai. It's a beautiful book. That's all I can say. I mean, once you get into these books, uh, you can't stop reading them. Then there's Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children, which was the first Indian English book that I read, and it completely that got me hooked onto Indian English authors because it's written in beautiful a beautiful prose, and we talk about English and Indian English today, but he was the first one. He called it, chutney. He came up with this term, Salman Rushdie, the chutneyfication of English, and he uses a lot of chutney English in a very humorous way in his book. And even the some of the characters are named in such a witty way. I remember there was a character called the Rani of Kuch Nahi, and there's a place called Kuch Bihar which has a royal family, or had a royal family, but from that he just took off on that and he made up this name. So yeah, I mean there's so many things, and I could just go on and on. Arundhati Ray's God of Small Things is another favorite. So yeah, there are many, many fantastic books written by They're world-class books, and it's not like they're difficult to read, or they're absolutely riveting, absorbing stories. Anyone can read them, but I'm really surprised that many people, instead of reading their books, the there are also lots of trashy Indian English books being written. I don't want to mention the authors' names, but I don't understand why people read their book. It's not that these books are like, oh my God, this is too esoteric or too difficult to. It's not like that. So I would really encourage anybody who's watching your podcast to try out some of these authors that I mentioned. You won't regret it.
Thanks for that message, Shumanto. Now let's rewind back to your early life. Can you tell us something about your childhood and if your love for language started early in your childhood and how?
Yeah. So I think I've repeated the story many times, but I was I uh, I started going to school in Kolkata, and then my parents suddenly, my father got a job in Manchester, England. So I think I was around 6 years old maybe, and we suddenly moved there. And I had just been learning CAT cat, BAT bat, and I suddenly found myself in the school surrounded by English kids, and I didn't really know the language. But the beauty of being at that age is that you can just absorb and pick up a language so fast. And I still remember like and we used to sit around these tables. There'd be like four or five of us sitting around one table. And I remember clearly sitting quietly, not saying a word for a couple of weeks. And then I just started talking. And perhaps I was making mistakes, but that's the other great thing at that age. You don't have any inhibitions about making mistakes. And also, I think your language learning skills at that age are remarkable. So two things combined, I think my language skills took off. I remember I took to this language so well, like to use a phrase like a duck to water. And I remember in our school we had this graded read, like there was this Ladybird series of books for which were designed for schools. And like if you were at a particular age group, you had a series of books graded according to your reading level. And one day my teacher called my mother in to say that, Shumanto's finished all the books. There are no more books in this series which are suitable for somebody of his age group. So yeah, so this is me showing off about me at a very early age. So I think yeah, since then I've had this, and then we came back to Kolkata, and in our house, like we had a room called the library. So there was one huge room which was my father's study, and it was lined from floor to ceiling with bookshelves. So we had, and these books were from generations because this was an old house, like from the time my father was actually born in that house. So there were old books, different aunts and uncles books. There was one section which was all children's books, which belonged to my older brothers, to the older generation. So I would just spend hours reading over there. So, I mean, reading, and I still remember I would, uh, at night, I would want to read a book when I went to bed, and my mother would say, I'm going to turn the lights on. And I remember I'd put the book under my pillow, and early morning, I would get up early. Can you imagine before, because I wanted to get in some reading before I went to school. So I'd get up early and I'd take that book out from under my pillow and read it till it was time to get up and get ready for school. Yeah, so I've always had this kind of love for language, particularly the English language, and the love for reading.
Wonderful. In Hindi, there's a saying, "Poot ke pag palne mein hi dik jate hain," which roughly translated means by looking at the feet of the child in the cradle, you can predict the long strides he'll take in the future. So it's wonderful, and it's extraordinary to see that you have a Master of Science degree in Applied Maths from the Clemson University. I recall in one of your interviews, you narrated an interesting story about your teaching experience at that university. Please do regale us again with that one.
Yeah. So I remember I went to do my master's degree there after doing a bachelor's in mathematics, which itself is a wonder to me because I used to struggle with mathematics in school, but somehow my father also had been very poor at mathematics, so he was very keen that his kids do well and not to. And I actually wanted to give up mathematics as soon as I could, and he said, "No, no, you must study it." And so I found myself first doing graduating, with a bachelor's in mathematics, then doing my master's in applied mathematics. And when I was doing that, of course, it's called a teaching assistantship. To be able to pay my fees, I had to teach. And I remember I'd never taught till that point. So here I found myself teaching probability and statistics to undergraduates. And the thing is that some of the undergraduates there were like these guys were like football players, American football players. So they're huge, towering guys, like they kind of. And I remember there was one particular guy. He would sit in the front row and he would constantly disrupt the class. I would be writing on the board, and he would be like, I know, throwing things and cracking jokes and making everybody else laugh and not pay attention. And I was wondering, like, I had sleepless nights. I said, I can't get through a semester like this. First of all, I've never taught before, so I was nervous about teaching, and then my class was being constantly disrupted. So and I said I have to talk to this guy, but it's funny. Like in a normal situation, a student might be nervous about approaching a teacher. In this case, the teacher was nervous about approaching this hulking student. So, but I did. I one day told him very fearfully that, could you stay back after class? I need to discuss something with you. So he looked surprised. He stayed back. And I told him, I said, look, this is the first time that I'm teaching, and I may not be doing a great job, but I'm really trying my best. But you're not making things easy for me at all by disrupting the class and encouraging everybody else to do it. So I really would appreciate your cooperation. So he said, okay. And then that's it, that it was like he was very surprised that I spoke to him about this. And then it was like unbelievable, the transformation from the very next day. Not only was he well behaved, but he ensured that everybody else in class was well behaved. In fact, if somebody was disrupting the class, he would, and because he was like this guy that nobody wanted to mess with, he would kind of like give them a warning look, and then he would turn back and look at me to say like, see. And yeah, so things changed, and I got more and more confident about teaching, and then teaching became a real breeze for me. Also, I think that I come from a family of academics. My grandfather was a professor. My father was a professor. My mother was a school teacher. Both my brothers are professors. So my cousins are all teaching in various places. So I think those genetics of teaching finally kicked in after a while, after these initial hiccups. But this was a great life lesson for me because sometimes I didn't know how to tackle the situation, and I thought that maybe just being honest and asking this person to help me out instead of being my adversary it actually worked, and this person could see my point of view. So it's really looking back, like a great lesson that I learned that day.
Yeah, that's something which is funny as well as profound at the same time. Uh, but you were and still are a handsome man. You did modeling and a lot of advertisements. One of the most famous ones was with Kareena Kapoor, no less, where you are her stalker. That was for Peter England shirts, I believe. And please tell us something about that ad. And while you are at it, how was it interacting with Kareena Kapoor?
Yeah, so I mean that was a lot of fun. Pradeep Sarkar was the director of that ad, and he became a very good friend. And unfortunately, he's no more. But yeah, I mean it was like wow, like I'm interacting with Kareena Kapoor. So it was interesting. The thing is that she was quite reserved with me because I mean, and also the way shoots happen is that suddenly you find yourself in a place, like you're suddenly shooting with somebody you've never met them, you don't know anything about them, and but yeah, I mean it was fun. I mean she was very pleasant, but she kept her distance. uh, I mean I think by the end of the shoot she became a lot friendlier, but initially it was like she was. And it's very funny when you do shoots like this because when the camera comes on you're sort of reacting to each other, but when the camera's off each person stays in their lane so to speak. And also there was it technically, because I had to drive this car, I had to brake at one particular point, and I was very nervous because one of the shoot crew was actually sitting there at the line where I had to brake, you know and I was really nervous. I said I'd better not run over this guy. So yeah, so there are so many things like this that you have to be conscious of in a shoot. So it's like, when you see the final film you don't realize any of these things, but yeah, so there's lots going on. So, and I'm sure somebody like Kareena Kapoor, who was emerging as a big heroine at that time, she would be also be conscious of her image and her profile and so on and so forth. So yeah, there were all of these things going on, but all told it was a really interesting experience, and I think that the ad came out well. So that's something that I'm really happy about.
You want to tell our viewers how you address Karina with a long A in that ad? Do you still remember that?
Yeah, yeah, of course, Karina. So, like, uh, there's, it starts with this punk-looking guy stalking her at a hotel, and, she basically is trying to escape that guy, and I drive up in the with my car, and I say, get in. And I ask her where she's going. She says to the airport. So I drop her to the airport, and then at the end of the ad, when she comes and finds a seat and sits down, and there's somebody with a newspaper, reading a newspaper, and so just as she's sort of relaxing back in her seat, she again hears Karina, and then like the newspaper is lowered, and it's me who's sitting there, and I'm saying Karina to her. So yeah, kind of funny, but it was fun.
It was fun, and I was playing that ad the other day, and it brought me a smile on my face. And you even played a small part in the famous movie Piku, and almost married the character of Deepika Padukone there, didn't you? So please tell us how that movie happened, and while you are at it, how the non-lead characters are treated on the movie sets with stars like Amitabh Bachchan and Deepika Padukone around.
Yeah, so the person who wrote the script of Piku, her name is Juhi Chaturvedi. She was my colleague. Uh, by that time, she'd left the Ogilvy, where we were both working, and she'd started writing, collaborating with Shujit Sarkar, whom I also knew because we had collaborated on a lot of ads with Shujit Sarkar from the agency. But anyway, I think when they were casting for this film and for this role in particular, Juhi thought of me, and she told Shujit that I think Sumanto would be the right guy. She sent me a message asking me, would you do it? I said, yeah, sure. She said, okay, Shujit will call you. And then Shujit called me and it got finalized. Uh, then, of course, this particular scene was shot in Kolkata, and I went for that. Now, I was treated very well, first of all, because it's a little different. I think that in a normal Bollywood shoot, if you're doing a small part, you're not treated that well, very frankly. You're probably made to sit around for hours and hours and hours, and then called to do the shot, and you're really like a, because this Bollywood is a very hierarchical place. If you're not a star, then you're a nobody, and then you're treated accordingly. It's very unfortunate. So, but in this case, the producer, Shujit Sarkar's producer, Ronnie, was also there, whom I've dealt with from the advertising agency. They introduced me to Amitabh Bachchan, who had actually, I had worked, I'd interacted with him before that. Not that he would have remembered me, but because I was directly introduced by the director to the actors as, the, this is this is Sumanto, and he's a creative director from advertising. So it wasn't like I'm a nobody extra actor. It was more about, I was positioned as this guy from advertising, the advertising world, and somebody who's established in his profession. So yeah, so I was treated very well there. And I remember that when we first started shooting, I was nervous because I suddenly said, "Oh my God, I'm going to be doing a scene with Amitabh Bachchan, who's like, one of the biggest stars this industry has known." And I wasn't actually so nervous about shooting with Deepika Padukone, but I was nervous about shooting with Amitabh Bachchan. And so I still remember that the first take that happened, I think that I was just like rushing through my lines, and Mr. Bachchan said, "Relax, take it easy." And then after that, I did kind of start taking it easy, and so it then after that it went. And I think Shujit was just with his camera. He was just going around shooting it from different angles, and we did a few takes, and it was done. Yeah. So
Wonderful, wonderful. So, how did you jump into the world of advertising? The name advertising is synonymous with you. So, where in the world of advertising, you were a copywriter, then an executive creative director at Ogilvy, then chairman and chief creative officer at 82.5 Communications. So, tell us something about that journey. And while you're at it, what would your advice be to the young folks of today who want to jump into this field?
yeah, so I think that well, you mentioned earlier about the fact that I did a master's in mathematics. Then after that, I also did an MBA. So I did my MBA at McGill University, and uh, I think I've talked about the fact that I I kind of considered myself a bit of a professional student at that point, because I think I was finishing a degree and then going to another one, because I didn't want to go to that big bad world of jobs, the working world. And I thought that I was very comfortable. I was always a very diligent student, so I was very comfortable in this world of academics. And also, unlike other people, I'm very impressed, especially today, with young people in school who know that they want to join advertising or whatever else. But I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and then I enrolled in this MBA. And when I was doing the MBA, the course that I found the most interesting was the advertising course, where they used to show us ads. And I used to think these ads look so interesting, and I wouldn't mind working on making such ads. But I had no idea about the back end, how this process works. This was just a thought in my head. And I remember that in the second year, towards the end of my MBA course, there was a contest run by the French government, the French Tourism Board, perhaps, where you had to write a slogan for France. And I wrote some, I don't remember now what the line was, but I wrote something and I forgot all about it. And then suddenly somebody said, "Hey, you won the prize for this," and which was a trip to France, which for other reasons never happened. But yeah, so I said, "Hey, I have maybe a knack for writing things like that." And then I came after my MBA. I came back to India. I came back to Kolkata, because that also surprised people. They said, people are desperate to stay back abroad. They go to study abroad and they find every possible way to stay back. I said, no, I somehow, while I had a great time when I was there, I feel that for me, home is India, and I want to be back home right now. And I came back. And yeah, once I came back to Kolkata, again at that point in time, it so happened that I had a few cousins who were in advertising, and they were in the creative field, and I could see that they used to dress very informally. And I thought, I would love to be in a job where I could dress like this. And I'd already, got a taste of what ad films were like, and I thought that was fun. So all of this put together, I decided to apply to for a job. There was an agency, there still is an agency in Kolkata called Response Advertising, which was run by Mr. Ram Ray, who was a legend in advertising. And I approached him, and he got me to write an essay, which I still have that essay somewhere. And I wrote that essay, and he said, "You've got the job." And he said he wanted to hire me in client servicing. He said, "You've got an MBA." So I said, "If you don't mind, I'd like to work in creative." And I said, "If you find after 6 months or a year that I'm not suited to this, then I'll switch to." So then I got into creative, and that the rest, as they say, is history.
And such a history and legacy in advertising is what you have left behind before retiring, and then writing this book. So I will ask you a rather strange question now, and please permit me to ask that, and hopefully you'll answer that frankly. You've been in the world of creativity throughout. Some people argue that alcohol and even calibrated use of drugs can enhance and even unleash creativity in bursts. Do you agree with that?
So I have seen colleagues, like some very famous celebrated people in advertising, who have used either alcohol or marijuana or some other drugs to get into that frame of mind, to to crack an idea, as in the lingo that we use in advertising. But it never worked for me, because if I went out for lunch and even had one drink, for me the rest of the day, I mean, it was like I might as well not have gone back to office, because I couldn't function professionally. I couldn't work, or I couldn't think of my advertising ideas and things that I was supposed to do. Like, my mind didn't work at all. Like, it was in some other zone. And the same with things like substances like marijuana. Like, I think they affect me very strongly. And I I get into this frame of mind where working or coming up with ideas is not something that, so it's something that absolutely does not work for me. So if it works for you, great. But I would also say that sometimes it doesn't end well if it becomes an addiction, and a strong addiction where you're consuming large quantities of it. It's all very well when you're young, but when you get older, your health completely suffers as a result of it. So I wouldn't recommend it, but to each his or her own.
Yeah, thanks for answering that candidly. Can you tell us how the creative world of advertising has transformed from when you were in charge to what the situation is now, and while you are at it, what's the role of AI in this creative business?
So yeah, I think that it's really changed because I mean, first of all, the whole digital revolution happened, and we moved from print, radio, television, and then from television to digital medium. And the digital medium itself is such a vast thing. I mean, after a certain point in time, everything is going to be the digital medium, and then there are many subdivisions within that. Whether there's social media, uh, or search, or whatever. There are so many aspects and so many specializations within digital. So I think one thing that happened was, as a result of it, whereas back in the day it was about one legacy agency like Ogilvy, for example, where I worked, which handled the entire advertising portfolio for a particular brand. But today what's happened is that it's become fragmented, and there are lots of little specialized agencies. So uh, an Ogilvy might still have the mandate for the main brand work, but then there would be a PR agency, then there would be a social agency, then there would be another digital marketing agency, and within that, for the different specializations within digital, there could be different agencies. So it's like five agencies which are working in tandem. More often than not, the brand, I think that legacy agencies are still very good at something which these new age agencies are not, which is thinking brand. So they look at everything from a brand lens. Uh, but then, there's this whole thing about the ownership. Who owns it? I mean, let's say the mainstream agency came up with the idea, but then it's being translated uh, into the different digital media by the different agencies. So whose idea is it? Who owns the idea? It's a very complicated thing, and it's just very complicated and a conflict prone way of working, because you have five companies who don't have any uh, you know they are only answerable to themselves and to the client, but they have no loyalty to one another. So it becomes a very messy situation. And I just think that as a result of this fragmentation, also it's become a much less profitable business, right? Because uh, back in the day, if a client spent 100 rupees, that whole 100 rupees went to one agency. Now that's divided among five agencies. And when you created, let's say, a video, an ad film, that could run for a year or two sometimes, or at least a few months. Today, it's everything about moment marketing, and you do a Father's Day piece which runs just for 2 days, for one weekend. And so so obviously the budget that's going to be spent on that is far less. You have to do social media posts. It's always on. It's every day. Uh, and for the agency people, the creative people, and the client servicing people too, it's the amount of work has just grown like this, because you're not only you're doing the brand thinking and the bigger pieces that you're working on, but you also have to have an approved post by the end of the day. So I think it's become a lot more complicated and a lot more difficult and a lot less profitable. And now added to that is this whole phenomenon of AI, which has come in, and it is rapidly changing the way people work. Yes, today the way it's working is, on the one hand, like a copywriter gets a brief, and then they put the brief into chat gpt and get some ideas from there. So maybe that's helping the person. At least maybe you will not get the perfect idea from there, but it's a thought starter at least. But on the other side is the client who's saying, hey, I can use AI to do the whole ad, so why do I need to pay you? And it's already happening where there are complete ads which are created by AI. And I've seen a couple of them where you cannot make out that that these characters are all created with AI, and the complete storytelling. So, and AI is getting more and more advanced by the day. I mean, in a year or two from now, it's going to be such that it's going to be seamless. So you will not be able to tell that something was generated by AI. So that is going to be taking away a lot of jobs in advertising. Uh, but yes, it's not like you're not going to need people. You're going to need people. You're going to need people who are experts in using the AI to get the best results out for a particular brand. But yes, I think that the number of people required for a job is going to be far fewer. So it's going to eliminate a lot of jobs. So I think this is, it's a turning point. And this is not just in advertising. I think AI is such a thing that it's going to turn the entire world upside down, because there are so many things that AI is going to take over. It is already doing that. I mean, from diagnosing diseases, to all these wars which are being fought with the help of AI, to advertising, to AI generating art. And there's a big debate that, is it really art, and is it really as good? Or a poem written by AI, can it ever be good? And maybe right now it's not, but I've just noticed in the last year how much all of this has progressed. And I think it's a frightening time from that perspective, especially if you're somebody who's starting out on their career journey. One doesn't know how many jobs are going to be eliminated because of AI.
That's an interesting perspective coming from you, Shumanto. But coming back to your book, Stories of Words and Phrases, how has the reception been so far? Do you already see it as a commercial success? Have people been trying to troll you about anything in the book yet?
So I don't have any numbers as yet, but anecdotally, what I'm seeing around me, it does look like it's doing pretty well. In fact, on Amazon, it went to the number one bestseller position in its category at the pre-order stage before it was even released, and it's kind of stayed there. So that's obviously a very positive sign. Now the Amazon Book Bazaar, they have this property called the Amazon Book Bazaar, which is coming up, I think, from it's between the 13th and the 17th. And they have selected this book as one of the books for the Book Bazaar. So I'm guessing that, the uptake is very good, which is why they're doing that. In terms of trolling, not yet. uh, I've just I have got a lot of positive feedback from people, including you. So which is very, very, very encouraging. I'm sure people will find flaws. I think every book has its flaws, which is all right. But yeah, overall the reaction seems to be very positive. So I'm very excited about that.
I'm sure it will be a success, and congratulations for that in advance. Uh, would you like to read a passage from any particular chapter of your book, Stories of Words and Phrases, for our viewers?
Sure. Do you have a particular one in mind? Uh,
Yes, my favorite was Close But No Cigar, which is chapter number 65. I can tell you the
okay.
page number 210. It's 210.
Sure.
Never often use this phrase, but after having read your book and this chapter in particular, I'm going to use it more
Great.
often now.
This is chapter 65 of Stories of Words and Phrases, and the chapter is titled Close But No Cigar. Have you been to a fair or carnival where you can win a prize by throwing a ring around a bottle or shooting a balloon? These days, the prize is likely to be a stuffed toy, but in the early 20th century in the US, the prize was often a cigar. If you came close to winning a prize but didn't, possibly because those games were rigged, the person manning the stall would say, "Close, but no cigar." While there is no incontrovertible evidence to prove it, this is most probably the origin of the phrase. A cigar is essentially a rolled bundle of dried, fermented tobacco leaves meant for smoking. The word cigar came into English in the early 18th century from the French word cigare or the Spanish word cigarro, which traces its roots back to the Mayan word sicar, which means smoking. I hasten to point out that in those days it wasn't children who were trying to win the prizes, it was adults trying their luck, and there was little awareness about smoking being harmful to health. In fact, smoking was very much in vogue, and cigars were considered a premium smoke, which they still are among a certain section of smokers. But our interest is not so much in the actual cigar as in the idiomatic use of the word as a part of a phrase. Close but no cigar is used to indicate that you came close to achieving success but didn't quite make it and therefore do not get any reward. A near miss is, after all, still a miss.
Wonderful, wonderful. And the way you pronounce the word cigarro, it gives you an impression that you speak Spanish, don't you?
Yeah, so I have learned Spanish many years ago. So it's interesting because in the Spanish that is spoken in Spain, where I spent 6 months of my MBA, they pronounce the letter C like like thing, like the way we would pronounce TH in the British pronunciation or the American pronunciation of thing, TH. So it's th. So it's not even cigarro. In South America, they would pronounce it as cigarro. In Spain, they pronounce it as cigarro, like a lisp. So yeah, so that's that. Yeah, that's one of the languages I've learned. I've learned a bit of French as well, but I learned Spanish a lot more thoroughly. But also, it's very rusty right now because it's been many years since I learned it, and I don't really keep up with it. But yeah, I think if I were to visit a Spanish-speaking country, then within a short span of time, I would be back to speaking it.
Wonderful. So, polyglot Sumanto, now that you have tasted blood as an author, can we expect some more books from you in the future? Perhaps even a novel, an autobiography, or a set of short corporate stories? And are you already working on something in a stealth mode?
Well, I don't know if I'm working on something, but I can say that uh, I would be able to produce a sequel to this book in very short order. So yeah, I think that I have no idea whether my publisher wants a sequel or not, but yeah, I'm ready to uh, put together a sequel to the book. And yes, on other topics as well, I am uh, in kind of stealth mode co-writing a book, which is also a non-fiction book on an Indian director. I don't want to say too much about it. So I was approached by friends who are doing the research, and they wanted a writer to help them write the book. So yeah, that's a book, but that's in very early stages. And yeah, I would love to write about. I would love to try my hand at fiction someday. Uh, Maybe some very unusual. I have written short stories. I've written poetry, but I haven't yet tried my hands at writing something that would make for a full-length book. But yeah, why not?
Best of luck to you, Shumanto, for your future ventures. And it was a pleasure talking to you, Shumanto. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been in a delightful conversation with the ace of the advertising world, the social media ruler called the English Nut, and now a brilliant author with his maiden book, Stories of Words and Phrases. Shumanto Chattopadhyay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Prashant Upadhyay.